So, hello, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you for joining us for the penultimate episode of the Dare Dallas webinars. I think when we go back to, oh gosh, when was it? Probably the end of March when we started doing these. I didn't really think we'd be doing them one a week up until this time. So it's been a lot of fun, and so I thank everyone that's contributed to them and everyone that's actually given some nice comments. And I think it's been very enjoyable for us and hopefully for the experts that we've had on too. So today I'm joined by one of the most respected and recognised figures from the art world. For those of us that know the galleries of Mayfair, I would say his name and that of his fathers have been synonymous with the pre-Raphaelite and the Victorian artists and also British modern. But to many of our viewers, though, I think our guest will be instantly recognisable as one of the long-standing experts on the show, the Antiques Roadshow. So, Rupert Maas, thank you very much for joining us today and having us on the. So, Rupert, first question then. I suppose having a scholar and an art dealer as a father somewhat coloured your career kind of prospects, isn't it?
Unusually for a father and son business, in a good way, yes. I adored and respected my father. I know it's unusual and very unfashionable thing to say. I wish I could say that he beat me mercilessly and sort of forced me into the business in sort of Victorian Dickensian way, but he didn't, I'm afraid. He just was a very cultivated man who wrote like an angel, and I adored him, you know, and he was very smart as well. If he'd said anything didactic to me or tried to coerce me in any way at all, or even hem me in just a little bit, I'd have immediately sussed it and legged it in the opposite direction. So he was a fox too.
Fantastic. Would you say that your taste in paintings over the years has grown to mirror his, or did you try and instantly kind of differentiate yourself from his tastes?
Well, no, I didn't try that, and largely because you can't do that. Victorian is a word that's used too much in the pejorative sense now, particularly by certain art critics. And actually, when you think about her reign, it was 3 generations. It was hugely long, from 1837 to 1901. And essentially, before she came to the throne, you're talking about Georgian England, really, pre-industrial revolution. It's a completely different world. And by the time she died, in the 20th century, for goodness sake, we're in the modern world. So it's the white-hot pace of change throughout her reign, even though she's seen as rather a static figure, particularly after Albert dies culturally. So much happened, and so it embraces so much change. You cannot say Victorian; it doesn't mean anything. Not anymore. Not even a little bit. So what I'm trying to say is that there was an awful lot of really wonderful art being painted during her reign, and so no, I could not throw that baby out with the bathwater. There are just too many good things, and if you don't like one, there's someone else.
Do you think, and it's possibly a bold statement, but do you think your father possibly single-handedly reversed the reputation of pre-Raphaelites?
Certainly not single-handedly, no. But he did do quite a lot to help with that. I mean, really, his most influential book he published in 1969, the year of the moon landing, for goodness sake. And he only did it because a publisher said, "You've got this beautiful painting by Frederick Lord Leighton called Flaming June. And it's of a girl sitting on a marble bench in the midday sun in the Aegean and wearing this beautiful apricot dress. It's almost square." And she said, "It doesn't matter what you write, whatever you put behind the cover of that picture is going to sell." It just happened that my father wrote a good book by chance, really. I think the publishers would have taken it whatever it said.
Is it true? Is it true that everyone said that your father was mad for spending 1,000 guineas on that painting?
Yes, they did say that, and bad to ask 2,000.
Phenomenal. Now, in terms of the way in which Victorian paintings are currently on the market, how do you feel that is, and how do you feel that they've changed in the last 20 or 30 years?
It's funny you should ask me that question right now, because we're at a sort of crossroads, I think, with the virus and lockdown and the changes we're seeing in the big 2 sale rooms, big 3 really. you know, Sotheby's has just been bought for $4.8 billion, I think, last year or the year before. It's borrowed money. And basically, you know, just at the moment, that's not a business that's sustainable. So they're going through a very hard time. One of the casualties has to be Victorian pictures. They're being rolled into 19th century pictures now. And
yes, I've noticed that the mixture in what they're doing now and amalgamating.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing, because there are some great Victorian pictures. And one of the things that gives Victorian pictures a bad name is the quantity and quality of the repetitiveness of the cliches that are made of the better things. And so to support, I don't know, 20 good pictures in a sale of 200, you need 150 also rans. I think it's possibly a good thing just to put the best of Victorian with the best of French, German and Italian pictures in the same period. Call it 19th century, why not? It works. And the British hold their end up.
In terms of your stock and how you have kind of moved, there seems to be a little bit more of a move into 20th century. Would you say that that's reflective of your current taste or just the market?
Well, you know, to say that we specialize in pre-Raphaelite pictures is quite a sort of, it's true in a sense, in the widest possible sense, but in the narrowest sense, pre-Raphaelitism only lasted for 5 years, and really you could number their pictures on the fingers and toes of a human being. You know, there aren't many of them, so you can't really specialize in them anymore. They're all in museums or private collections forever. So yeah, I have moved, and I've moved, and I deal in all sorts of things, and not just British pictures. I don't necessarily showcase things that aren't British, but I do trade in many different kinds of art. My father gave me an expensive education, which he considered totally wasted upon me. I've tried to rectify that since his death by looking at all art and trading in it too. But every year we do a British Pictures catalogue and we put the best of what we can find in that.
Smashing. Now, I asked a couple of the people that work with us as to some questions that they would like to ask you whilst I had you on the webinar, and one came up that I thought was quite interesting. Now, it was actually raised by somebody that you and I know both quite well, and the question was: is it a myth or is it true that your father's first pre-Raph exhibition, that the grandchildren of the artists in the cities were actually at the private view?
Yes, that's absolutely true. They were known as the PreRaphaelite Ladies. I remember them very well. There was Holman Hunt's granddaughter, Diana Holman Hunt, a formidable and most amusing woman, who a friend of mine described once as pantherine. I thought that described her very well. She was quite a grande dame and she was highly intelligent. I liked her enormously. And then there were several really, but they all had connections and memories that my father enjoyed enormously. Not commercially, I wouldn't have said, but really to help him write his books. And they were kind to me as a small boy. I remember them all.
When was that show?
1961, I think. And it was, I think my father claimed that at the time that it was the first commercial pre-Raphaelite exhibition. There hadn't been any specifically named selling exhibitions of pre-Raphaelite art, even in 1848 or 1853. In 1961, my father's was the first one.
Gosh. And what was the effect that had? Did it change the way people viewed or looked at this period?
Well, I think it did, and it chimed with the age. You know, we're talking about the sort of Celtic imagery, the hippie movement, and this revival of interest in the Middle Ages, which was very trendy in the 60s. And quite a few emergent pop stars, you know, had new loot and big mansions, didn't know what to put it, and thought, well, pre-Raphaelitism, I love all these knights in armour and sort of damsels in distress. I'm going to fill my mansion with those. So they became really quite fashionable, I think, in the 60s.
Fantastic. Now, we're going to move on to something that I think a lot of people that will be viewing this today will actually know you best for, and that's obviously the fantastic show that is the Antiques Roadshow that's been around for quite a long time. So what was your first introduction to the Roadshow, and what can you remember about some of the first things that you saw on screen?
Well, Geoffrey Munn got me my job. Geoffrey Munn, the jewellery specialist, who's perhaps the most charming man in Britain. And he asked me once, I bumped into him in Christie's, and he said, "What do you think of these pictures?" And I told him, and he said, "Do you think you could do that in front of the camera?" And he recommended me to the producers. So I went along for a sort of trial, and it turned out to be a sort of full roadshow day. And the existing experts were hard pressed, so I was forced into action right at thrown at the deep, you know. And the best way it could have happened, actually, but as I had a great time and was an actual help, and I stuck. I think if I'd had time to think about it and worry about it, I might have frozen in the headlights, you know, a bit. But as it was, I either had to sink or swim, and I swam. It was great fun, and it's been fun ever since. Love it.
Do you remember what that first piece you saw was that you had to help out on?
It was by Sebastian Moonlight Pever, as he's known, and it was a picture of moonlight over rippling water. He's particularly good at picking out the reflections on the tops of the wavelets, with a castle and a full moon in the background, and a fire lit by some smugglers on the foreshore. So there was warm light and cool light, and it was very atmospheric. I was lucky to get it because it was something I'd get my teeth into. You can't shine unless you've got something to reflect off, and it was a good image, and so I was lucky.
Fantastic. What do you think it is about the roadshow that has meant that it's been carried on for so many years and so many different series?
Because it's real. It's very real. It's unbelievably British. We are very rich in objects in this country because, you know, we didn't get panzers rolling over us, and we haven't been invaded for quite a long time. There's just so much out there. We've got an amazing cultural heritage in all these old buildings that we love, and it may be that we don't have quite the same toffs that lived in them when they were built, but you know, I would remind you of what the Soviets said when they restored Petersburg to its glory. They said, well, you know, yes, these exploiting classes lived in them and paid for them, but you people, you built them. And it's true that these enormous buildings, they're so beautiful, are actually expressions of community as much as class. And
it's everyone's heritage.
Yeah, and the places where we show, therefore, they're extremely beautiful. Lots of people should turn up to it, so it's truly a democratic event. And then lastly, I'd say that the real reason it succeeds over other formats of trying to do the same thing, is because it's the only show about old stuff on the television that concentrates on the object and only the object. And in other words, the story, yes, it's important. The owner, his contribution, the experts, so-called, his too. They're all important, but the object is the star.
No, and I think you're completely right with the fact that, you know, that it is real. And I've worked on a few shows, slightly less highbrow, unfortunately, and it's very clear. And I think a lot of people are of the opinion that it's all set up and people are kind of brought in, but these people do turn up, and these things are still out there. And what people forget to realise is that these things are still found in the most ridiculous of places, and suddenly they're you know, in an attic, and it's you know, cliche, yeah, but it's true, and they do turn up.
I'll be having a ghastly day, you know, thinking, oh God, there's nothing, and then suddenly this extraordinary thing will just land on the desk out of nowhere, as if it was beamed down from outer space, and you just hardly believe it, you know. You get all excited, and that kind of shines through and comes out in the programme. So there's genuine excitement. I suppose the other thing is that we all love doing it. We're a great group of friends, and we have the most enormous sort of parties and things. You know, it's great fun.
Jolly good. Now, I was wondering if you could tell us just a few anecdotes about some of the greatest things that you've seen on the show.
Well, you know, Victorian pictures are not terribly valuable, but most, you know, not by international picture standards. You know, we're not talking hundreds of millions of dollars. But I valued an Orpen at Greenwich once, which the owner had been told by a museum was not by Orpen, but actually it was.
I saw one. Yes, I remember it very well. Was this the military museum that it was at?
It was in the Maritime Museum. Well, it was sorry, in the Maritime College, in fact, in the Painted Hall. You know, and this picture also happened to be very lovely, and it was called The Spy. She wasn't really a spy. She was actually the artist's girlfriend at the time, but it was possibly the first version, certainly in my opinion, the better version. The other was in the museum, who told the owner it was wrong. So that's very nice, and that was worth like £250,000, and that's quite a lot for the show. Another was Alma Tadema's portrait of his friend, the etcher Leopold Lernstam. Very informal. Alma Tadema is known for his kind of Cecil DeMille sort of classical confections, really, you'd call them, of people standing around in togas on marble. They're beautifully painted, but that's what he's known for. This was the most intimate and telling psychological portrait of his great friend Leopold Lernstam, and he gave it to him for his wedding gift in 1883. That was also worth a similar amount. And the great thing is the owners didn't know. The owner of the Orpen told me that it was worth more than his house. And the owner of the Alma Tadema had always known what it was. I mean, you know, it's our discovery, but he knew what it was, but not what it was worth. So that was rather dramatic too. And there have been many things.
But I think what the great thing about the Roadshow does, and it does very well, is there is the human side to things as well as the object. And so whilst you say it is about the object, and there is, you know, it's primarily about that, there is the story to it. And I think in many ways that's what captures the imagination of the audience. And through specialists that have worked on the show over, you know, however long it's been going on for, and there's a constant evolution.
Well, that's very true. And actually, my favourite object of all wasn't filmed by me. It was a white feather given to somebody considered a coward in the First War, and it had been kept by his family in a little matchbox because the man was a conscientious objector, and they gave white feathers to the cowards, you know. It was a branding, social branding. And that object had no value, but the most immense power. You know, you looked at this thing and you realised what it stood for and what it meant, and the story around it, and the significance to the family. You know, that was one of the great, what they call roadshow moments, I think.
No, undoubtedly. Rupert, I'm afraid we're running out of time today. We seem to have flown by on this, but it's been an absolute pleasure to have you on the webinar this week. So thank you ever so much for taking time out of your day and coming to chat to us. And ladies and gentlemen, I'm afraid we are a bit out of time, but I'm extremely grateful to Rupert for coming to speak with me today. I hope you've enjoyed today's talk. Rachel and myself will be back next week for what will actually be, believe it or not, the last of this series of webinars. We're finally kind of getting to that point whereby doing one a week, I think, isn't as required as it was before, with everyone having their jobs to go back to. But I do hope you've enjoyed everything. Please connect with us on LinkedIn to be invited to some more fascinating webinars that we're going to have over the next few months. And please do keep the comments coming, and any suggestions for people that you'd like for us to speak to come on. So that's all that's left for me to say. And thank you ever so much to Rupert for being on the show. And thanks very much, and goodbye.